See if I can do this. It always kind of goes back to the same thing. I don't play much anymore, but I go through phases. I had to try to wake myself up because I felt this lethargy. Stayed up quite late last night working on. I've been working on this. I've made a couple videos. One of the videos that I just posted got blocked, but yeah, I've been working on this. And the video I just posted on it, when it only had making the first tier. This is partway through the second tier. Got my paper clips on so it's easier to put the circle on, but the circle is going to be quite a bit smaller, so I'm going to have to push these. It's going to be trickier than gluing on my first tier, which I didn't show. I showed everything up to the paperclip point on my first tier. Anyway, the whole thing got blocked. So, and I erased the original video, but I can still like play the video I uploaded to YouTube on I can watch it from YouTube, but I have two YouTube accounts, and my other one, which I don't really use much, but it's there. I'm not able to see it, so I'm going to re-record it and redo it. So I know that project's waiting in the wings, which I was going to do right now, but I was feeling so like, ugh. I was trying to figure out how I'm going to wake myself up to do what I need to do this other project, and I thought I'll play my guitar for a minute. Sometimes playing a little music like gets that up, you know. Which I guess in a sense is kind of the Old Testament reference where there's all these passages, you know, to the magicians, to the musicians, musicians, mathematicians, the musicians, to the musicians, to the musicians, to the musicians. Do it like this, do it like that, do it like this, do it like that, to the musicians. And I'm certainly not of that caliber of musicianship, you know. And earlier today, I received quite a jolt. I often wait for, you know, I look forward to Saturdays much as I did as a child, because it was when my imagination could let loose. As a child, it was Saturday morning cartoons. You know, as a college student, it might have been If I was hanging out with some of my friends, maybe sleeping in late after a party, waking up, smoking some dope, and eating a good breakfast. Um, Now it tends to be I can catch up on some of the interesting things in the world just from my little my little man cave, where I have my phone and I can access, I wouldn't say everything in the world, but more than anyone's ever been able to, right? Even from my little layperson perch. Yeah, and it's worth noting, I call that little ditty, the working title is Chicadee, because I saw some beautiful little chickadees at the job I was at this week, and they were pretty much my source of happiness. There were so many bird feeders. It's way up on a hill. It's like a not underground house, but like it's implanted into the landscape. Not quite an earthship. Certainly not hippie-ish. It's very it's hard to describe, really. It's like Art Nouveau, rustic, Art Nouveau, not rustic, not country, not manor, neo-feudal, neo-feudal, Art Nouveau, Great Gatsby. Anyway, they had lots of bird feeders around, and they were exclusively populated by little chickadees. And being so accustomed to being unbothered up there, you could get quite close. If you got right up to the bird feeder, they'd leave. But they'd go a couple branches out. And they'd stay there unless you looked at them, and then they'd go a couple more branches out. Which got me thinking a lot about Galapagos Islands, which aren't really discussed enough, like why so infrequently, despite the obvious glaring connection between like the Garden of Eden, or also, like typically what those dudes who knock on doors, what are they called? The Christian dudes who knock on doors and don't do birthdays. Damn it. Santo Spinacci used to be one. What are they called? Jehovah's Witness. Some of the pamphlets that they've given me over the years, I remember one in particular, like, it's a picture of, like, it's the whole lions and lambs laying together type deal. And, it's got, like, little kids, like, braiding the lion's hair, and, like, just all the animals hanging out, and everything's pretty, nice bright colors, and it looks great, Which is commonly laughed at. Most people in the world, most people in common conversation are like, oh, what a stupid, naive, ridiculous notion. And yet, the sparkling gem, the, not even empirical, the natural, the manifest gem of the entire mythos, never mind logos, but the entire milieu of Darwinism is the Galapagos Islands, the Beagle. However much they had to do with each other, but you know what I'm saying. And it's like one of the most protected places on Earth because it's one of the most amazing places on Earth. Why is it so amazing? Never mind if it was actually created by people, like goldfish were, who can see, who are the only animals on the planet who can see ultraviolet and infrared. And they were a creation of eugenics. But not just eugenics, and not just natural selection, but what's allowed to happen when the divine intellect is allowed to expand in the material world amongst a population, never mind just individuals. But anyway, that connection, which is heralded by much more, still criticized by many people, rightly or wrongly. But it's those finer philosophical points. It's like this morning, I've been into Iamblichus lately, and this morning, what started kind of this wave, I had a few errands to run. Like I said, I stayed up last night, but all week I stayed up less late, but I got up more early. So all week I was getting like maybe 5 hours sleep, and last night I got like 7-ish, 6.5, 7, maybe 6, but just a little bit more. I was feeling okay, but after I did my errands, I came home. There was a little bit of angst. And then I had one of my famous little drinks. Thank God, little. That didn't really help. But it was, the guitar. But anyway, man, I read the first couple pages of this translation by Thomas Thayer. It had something to do with the Chaldeans. I've been listening to online a little bit of audiobook of the Oracle of the Chaldeans, which is a fragmentary work. Worth noting that it talks about the monad a lot and fire a lot, which has a natural connection with both Leibniz and Heraclitus, notably, and also phonetically worth noting that Heraclitus and heretical are practically, I don't know what that word is, anagram? Practically anagrams. And practically anagrams are almost more important as far as hidden, occult as in not that occult strictly means hidden, but as far as like hidden codes, because it's not completely a right brain code. There's just a little bit of left brain. So it's like the first step into the good side of the left-hand path. It's like the first step of near anagrams. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word. Not antonyms, but maybe something like that too. Yeah, something like antonyms too, I guess. For instance, I've been thinking about this one. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to say about like codes. And I'm so bad at it compared to like the real masters. To call myself a student makes it seem pretty formal when it's not. For me, it's organic in the sense that it just a response to what arises naturally in me, seeking, questioning. I was watching this thing today. They were talking about. Well, I was watching about the revelation of the Magi. What's that guy's name? His last name's Landau. But within the last 10 or so years. He made a translation. I think the document's from like the 8th century or something, and he says that it probably relates back to late 3rd, early 4th century, a time of interest to me because of St. Agnes, Iamblichus, Constantine, Council of Nicaea, but specifically that, the whole like Arian, St. Nicholas deal, and then later St. Jerome, Hieronymus. Which has just come up within less than a year. All that stuff is just condensed as majorly important. Specifically around the whole Constantine thing and all that, and that main discussion. What's left out significantly, powerfully. Iamblichus, St. Agnes, St. Nicholas. I know it's all there, and yeah, the importance of the Magi. The fact that this dude made this thing like 10 years ago and it's not like big time. I was watching his channel. He's got like, guy has 3 subscribers. But now 4. But anyway, yeah, by Thomas Thayer, 18, I can't remember, 1820, 1850. And I have not had chills over my whole body. First couple paragraphs. And it's also interesting that it starts off with this letter from Porphyry. So there's Plotinus, Neoplatonus, all that. And then Porphyry and Iamblichus were 2 famous, quote-unquote, offspring of his. My choice is for the Iamblichian. And just reading the first 2 paragraphs, and actually after that, there were more terms that I'd have to look up, He writes in a very flowing matter where, sometimes between commas we're creating categories like a kind of matrix, but his is this like nested matrix where when he makes a comma, something's like coming out of it. Like Iamblichus's sentences, some sentences they go like this, or they're like categories and they go off in these trees, and you can say, okay, this is referring to this is referring to this. But Iamblichus, when he writes, he's making this statement, and then there's a comma, and it's like the whole thing. Now, this same shape is being repeated in the next line with a greater, so it's going like this, but within each of those, it's like, it's not just a self-referential or hypertext, it's a nested, holographic, hypersaturated text. And I'm not saying that because I have any qualifications, but he hit it. Just nailed it, And I felt that way about him as soon as I saw his name, and that he was more of a theurgist than Plotinus or Porphyry. That was all I needed. When I saw his name, it was like the first time I saw a Queen Anne's lace flower. It just lit my mind on fire. And then since I've actually started submerging myself in Iamblichus, I've tried some audiobooks, but no matter how slow or eloquent the speech is, though I get something out of it because it's truth. It's like Dan Winter says, the truth has a certain ring to it, But reading though, and I just have to kind of reread it, say it a little slower, let the images come, let the form of the thought come. so long as I could follow, which was only a couple paragraphs. But where really he only approaches, like, I basically, like, I got through is like, the word apologetics means one thing in like history and all that, but there's a certain sentiment of apology, of not even apology. In my case, it's quite often an apology. And in the letter, I believe it's from Porphyry to one of Iamblichus's students. I could have that a little wrong, but it's a letter from Porphyry and it's a response to that. And he mentions it's a response to a preceptor, a teacher, as a friend. Very important that he included that. Because it's not a scathing denouncement of this letter Porphyry wrote, but it's a surgical response that uses Porphyry's text as a way to, he just gets, it's like analyzing the unstated. Iamblichus's just even first couple paragraphs succinctly, efficiently, beautifully dissects the inexpressed suppositions that are erroneous. And Porphyry writes this letter and spends several sentences dissecting the choice of the first couple words, which seem harmless to anyone. And in fact, I quite enjoyed what Porphyry had to say, in so much as I could understand it. But that extra level of refinement by Iamblichus and being like, this is what's going on, this is what we're dealing with. And then what he's, and this is horrible. He'd have, I wouldn't even say he'd have a field day with me. If Iamblichus is dead, which is questionable, he'd be rolling over in his grave seeing me talk about him. But maybe a little bit hopeful, like, here's the dumbest guy in the world, and even he's heard of me, that's not so bad. As Iamblichus, I'd imagine, would, I wouldn't say highly esteem himself, but well esteem himself, because someone who is that right, impression or whatever, has to realize, like, I'm pretty alright, and it would probably be pretty good if folks read my shit, I'm imagining that wouldn't be the last thing that he thought, And the fact that he wrote something 1700 years ago, and I'm reading a translation, but a pretty good one, I would imagine, in so much as it touches all the points. First of all, he's talking about Pythagoras. My assumption is that because he wrote kind of like a biography of Pythagoras, that the fame that Pythagoras has is largely attributed to the expertise of Iamblichus, who speaks from a greater authority than that of just a philosophical historian. He's speaking as, theurgy is like what a lot of people might consider like witchcraft or demon worship or this or that, whatever. But, it's central, the mysteries, the real shit, not just where the gold's buried and all that kind of thing. The type of people who speak a matter-of-factly about polymorphism, about definitively peering through time, about true prophecy. Not just the symbolic shit, which is important too. But anyways, he's like, we're going to talk. Basically, he's like, we're going to talk about magic. We're going to talk about reason, perfect reason. As soon as you mention Pythagoras, you're obviously, it's just, you don't have to say it. It's about math. Or the whole deal with Plato and the Republic and this or that. And he says, and even Plato, in my understanding, is Plato's a Pythagorean dropout. He didn't get all the way. Not that that's a makes him like terrible or anything. Still smarter than me. But, you know, he said, anyone who doesn't know geometry need not enter here, right? So, do I study geometry? Kind of. Am I good? No. He wouldn't let me enter. Plato wouldn't let me enter, you know? But it's up to us to try anyway. So in some sense, math is always the substrate. So if we mention Hypatia, we might be talking about a hypotenuse. If we're talking about Apollonius, or even if we're talking in mythology, if we're talking about Apollo, we might be talking about the Apollonian null circle. Or like the Ptolemy's theorem. These are the references that mathematicians make to each other in a time when it wasn't so easy to preserve all this knowledge, so it had to be sewn into stories so that people had a way of remembering. Never eat soggy wheat. Stuff like that, except on a massive scale. You know, all of the Odyssey, all of the Iliad would have been something that stuffed a lot of knowledge into it, because that was the most efficient way. It's hypersaturated forms. It mimics the universe. But yeah, just the way in the first few sentences, he's like, we're going to deal with all these things. We're going to deal with everything. Anything that anyone might, you know, who's interested in learning and knowing the truth. He's like, these are, you know, these are different ways of talking about the truth, studying the truth, the things people are interested in. We're going to deal with all of them in a cohesive manner. Let's get it started. And then just starts going through the letter of Porphyry and being like, this, that, bang. This, that, bang. But in this bloom. Anyway, gave me chills. And then I had to step back, because I have a tendency to get excited, you know? And I like it. I liked feeling this. It was just this full body just tingles up and down. Felt like I had that Star Trek thing going up and down above me. I can't resist. Probably gonna break it. Mostly paper clips holding it together right now. Beat me up, Scotty, you know? That's how I was feeling. And made me feel really awesome. But when I feel too awesome, I've got to step back and be like, whoa. Because inspiration and scripture, man. I don't care what anybody says. Iamblichus is scripture. You want to talk about the Word of God? Which also reminds me that there's that famous scholar who says that the logos of John isn't the logos of the Greeks. That is absolutely I'm the dumbest guy in the world. And even I know that is the dumbest thing anybody has ever said. Ever. It's just like, that would be like saying if this culture has one God, this culture has another God, so when they talk about God, there's no connection. These cultures were integrated. It was just blurry edges everywhere. Even within like America, there's all these different types of local government, county government. In some places the town has more power, in some places the county has more power. Different states are different. The federal government exerts its power, lends its benefit in different ways, in different areas. So every little piece, every person for that matter, in America has a different relationship with the greater organism of the hierarchy of municipalities or whatever that govern us in a legal national sense, right? But it's part of a cohesive unit. It's also not isolated. There are other world things. There's, the black market and organized illegal activity, organized crime, or plus other secular governing bodies and clubs, cultures, societies, sections of cities, social strata, educational background. But there is this sameness, there's this thing that we share, right? So when we say government, yeah, we experience it differently. But there is a sameness to it. There are distinctions of essentially one thing. Amidst this one thing, there are these distinctions. People talk about, two Americas, but there's 300 million, 400 million Americas. And that's just talking about human beings. But the greater milieu of the logos, and not just as it's expressed in one language, and not just as expressed in one historically recognized time period. And that's actually another one of the things that I really like about Iamblichus, talking about, like, I forget the way he talks about it, but like, he makes some specific reference to the teachings of the ancients, or he doesn't maybe say it, but like seems to imply this specific lineage of knowledge that also exists across time. He's almost saying, like, in his time, there are those among us now who might be the proper receptacles of the teachings of the ancients, and we're wondering to ourselves, why are not our fellow teachers actually addressing this in a manner that relates to me? Like, I'm looking to my teachers, I'm looking to the knowledge of the ancients in his time, never mind our time. And he's saying it's right for these students to be looking at their teachers and being like, there's a disconnect. Like, you're not bridging the gap for me. I don't think you actually know. I don't think you're talking about what they were talking about. That's the it's more than an impression. That's what he's saying. And that's my way of stating it. Of course, he says it in a much nicer way. Which is something I gotta work on. But it's not just saying it in a nicer way, but like understanding. I was watching this thing, I was watching about the revelation of the Magi. I was reading up a little bit on that today online. I was interested to see that as part of that text, which is definitely at least 1,200 years old, maybe 1,800 years old, that in that text, it talks about St. Thomas going back to help the Magi because they needed his help. Like, they came for Jesus, and Jesus sent back Thomas, which seemed obvious enough to me when I said it last time, because I was like, I kind of figured it out, and it felt kind of nice. Like, I guess I already, like, it's not just that that's my story and I'm sticking to it as soon as it came out of my mouth. I watched that video of my own a few times, and I really liked when I heard that, because it sounded like the truth. When I listen to myself, a lot of what comes out is horseshit. This is kind of a horseshitty video, but even when I said it, it sounded true. Anyway, it felt pretty good just to see that and see it stated that way, in the way that it was. Like, it was a little less finger pointy than the way I said it, but it seemed to kind of, at a better level, strike the same chord. But I don't just have to find ways to say it in a better way. I still have I have to kind of I still have a lot of repositioning of myself to kind of stand in my place and see things true and good. Give people the benefit of the doubt better. I understand it perfectly theoretically, but actually embodying that viscerally, physically, getting all those Pavlovian triggers out of my physiology, out of my spirit, out of my form, outside my egg. That's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work to do it in such a way where the intellect and the emotions, where the reason, where marrying the right side and the left side, the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, and marrying the thought with the emotion as opposed to splitting it off. To have that true female-male marriage of like feelings and the intellect, having them married as one thing and not just using this to control this and keep it down or suppressed, but to have those authentic, a true response, a true emotional response. Like, that's the purest magic there is to simply marry those deep, 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 deep feelings, and not just suppressed feelings and not just suppressed emotions. Because there's the whole Freudian suppressed sexuality deal and all that, and that's true to an extent, but that also has to do with the cross-generational transmission of trauma. It also has to do with things that happened to us before our memory wall. As far as like I can remember so far back, I don't know what happened to me when I was one. So again, a lot of those Pavlovian things, or a lot of those suppressed wants or suppressed desires, are really landmines of Pavlovian trigger systems implanted by our culture, black magic trigger points, some deliberately placed and some just placed as byproducts of the disease of our culture. Whatever culture that is, people might be thinking I'm creating distinctions between cultures that I'm not creating, because there's a thread of truth through all cultures, and it's a thread, and in every culture it's a needle in a haystack. However, these needles have congregated over time, and they live a long time. So there are more condensed areas where these needles congregate and are more easily found in the haystack. The haystack's the norm. Took too many tangents. Yeah, appropriately marrying the feeling and the intellect. And very early on in reading Iamblichus, and this is where he lost me and where I'll have to look up more of the historical way those terms are used, plus the way they're used now. People discount the pull of the future on the past, and that there is like a backwards causal chain. Not that causality is the whole deal, but there is a causality exists. It's not the whole story, or the way that we've constructed it is not necessarily the pure causality. There is a pure causality. Its intricacies are certainly beyond my grasp. Working on it anyway, because what else is there to do? But yeah, he talks about the distinction between power, energy. He's some other term like that, and he's commenting on how Porphyry's kind of confusing the two and confusing the issue. Anyway, got some big chills, had to chill out, so wrote the little ditty. Chickadee. And while talking about chickadees, like they're makes me think of bird languages. I remember there was a book about bird languages in that Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange, something like that. It's a British miniseries, short miniseries. Really like it. Not saying that that's the way to go about it, but I just like that reference, and it's a good work of art. That miniseries is a good work of art, quite good actually. And yeah, it talked about bird languages, and I think a lot about that because there is, if we think of Morse code, and then even like a chickadee, it's like their range is so high up, their wavelengths of sound is so much higher than ours that their notes could sound the same if we weren't used to parsing slight differences in high pitches. But with little practice I've had with my like throat singing stuff, like, and also I have noticed differences in, occasionally I don't like to call it ringing in my ear. I like to think of it more as I sometimes hear very high frequencies. Where those frequencies are coming from sometimes is a little bit ambiguous, but I notice them. I recognize them, and I can now recognize differences. When I was younger, it was just that's ringing in my ears. But now it's like, whoa, I could hear something that's at a quite high frequency and notice between slight differences in the way they make me feel, or just the immediate impression I get. Because sometimes it's like, pay attention, this is important, and then other times it's like, be careful. Sometimes it's be attentive, and sometimes it's like, be careful. Not like, look the fuck out, be careful, but just be careful. Like, either be careful or be careful. Or be careful. You know, in that range. You know, and I've said it before too, like if you want to ruin your life, learn Morse code and then start listening to the chipmunks and the creaking of the trees and birds and start seeing what the world's saying to you from that aspect. But not only that, and And I don't like the whole analogy of like the quantum thing where like the event depends on the observer. I don't like it in the context of science that it's used, but it is a fitting metaphor to the entire universe responds to the way that we pay attention to it. And you will find, as I have, that when you pay attention to the clicks of the world, there's a story there. Certain letters come up again and again on certain days, certain combinations of letters. And it's always germane to what's going on. And it's a way of telling you what's going on, if you pay attention to the world in that way. If you pay attention to the stars, they'll tell you certain things. I don't know how to do that. But I know how to pay attention to what I pay attention to, and I know it's always speaking to the now that I'm experiencing. Giving me advice, which I sometimes take, sometimes don't, and giving me warnings. But we must remember that our environment is not just made up of beneficent creatures, entities, ideas. And does malice exist? Yes. A lion would take me down. We tend to place ourselves like as equals. Lions will never save the world. Lions will never save the world. Sharks will never save the world. Chipmunks, maybe. Maybe they got a chance. Chipmunks could do it. Squirrels, maybe. Yeah, maybe squirrels could. Koalas, they got a chance. They got a shot. Lions, no. Never happen. But would they kick my ass? Yes. Me versus lion and a Jeff. So I'll give him that. And I certainly don't wish any harm on him. It's just they're malevolent. They are. I understand domesticated ones. There's some sweet lions. I've seen some beautiful videos of sweet lions. But those aren't lions. It's like the leaves that fall in my car. I've saved a couple because they're beautiful, right? They have a story. Are they special or are they just leaves? They're 1 in a million. They touched a human being. It's pretty fucking good for a leaf. Right? Kind of. And I didn't even eat it. And it should be noted too that the sweetness that we see in a lion like that is in conjunction, if not response, but certainly in conjunction with the sweetness and compassion born from the expression of the divine as it shines through the spirit that fills or fulfills a human life. You know, the divine light of reason, so to speak, shines through a human being in a very, when a human being is positioned correctly, such that the divine light of reason is able to shine through it. There is a specialness to that is irreplicable. There's a specialness to that we have not found elsewhere. That is pretty unique about our position. But that's not the rule. But what even the layperson has in common, bad people who do bad things, like me, is that we receive enough of that we care. So I was listening to some scholars talk about some of the apocryphal texts today, and they're asking this panel, like, why do people care? Or what's important? What's the interest about, And the four of them went on, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes each. This is why lay people do it. This is why we do it, and a lot of this, a lot of that, a lot of back and forth. But it takes someone, it takes a real fool to say, what's the interest in this? People care and they want to know the truth. People genuinely care, no matter how smart or stupid they are, or how specialized or how generalized, no matter where they stand, no matter what they know and what they don't know. People care deeply, all the way down and all the way up. People care. And people want to know the truth. People get distracted from the truth because some distractions are unavoidable, and also because of discouragement, which is why it's important that Iamblichus, the truth has a certain ring to it. It's important that Iamblichus become more popular in the overall popular discussion about important thinkers of the past. Iamblichus. The connection with his interest in the Chaldeans, the Chaldean oracles, though fragmentary now, was obviously either a text or collection of texts. Oracle has so many meanings. But oracles, especially the plural oracles, that could pertain to so many different things and so many collections of those different things. The way they talk about fire, which goes all the way back to Heraclitus, the crying philosopher. Which goes to the tetrahedron. I just recently learned that fire is associated with John the Evangelist, the Word. When everybody talks about the way, basically you open that and it's like, in the beginning was the Word was God, Word was with God, blah, 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 logos, blah, blah, blah. But how it just starts right out and goes, boom! But anyway, how he's associated with the fire. And you just can't get away from that whole deal. As I've recently learned myself, but again, this is super important. It's important to the idea of geometry, Plato, Platonic forms, the pursuit of knowledge, the Republic, which most people would find abysmal. Most people would be like, no, most people would be like, I would never do this. That's how I feel about it. Because it leaves out, it's practical, but it leaves out, for instance, the story of David. God's like, no, I don't want that one. I want that one. The little weakling kid who plays a sweet song in the field. Yeah, that's my king. The wimp? Can't do nothing? Yeah, he's the guy. It leaves that out. The Republic leaves that out. Iamblichus puts it back. In short order, Iamblichus is like basically, and you might not derive this from the words right off, but he basically puts, it says, we're not allowed to just like give reverence or choose to give reverence to the idea of how nice the idea of the Most High is, and that's where we start from. The highest principle, the principle of principles. Like, we don't just say like we're gonna grant that. We're gonna say, yeah, we'll start there. It's not a lima. That's the start. There's no other place to start. That's where we start. It's the whole I think therefore I am type thing. You are not am because you think. Your thinking doesn't precede your amness. Anyway, I'm preaching now and I have no right. Get off my soapbox. Alright, I have sufficient energy to carry on with the sometimes monotonous duties of fulfilling a project to complete something. On to the next thing. And, thanks for allowing this opportunity. And I hope you're having a good day. And if you're not, I hope you're okay. And if you're not okay, hold on. Storm will pass. It will. Hold on to whatever you have to hold on to. It sounds presumptuous for me to say that. People don't talk enough about the fact that suicide's an epidemic. All these places and organizations devoted to like health in the world. The disease of suicide has not been solved. That's what I mean if you're not okay. Also, you might not be okay because of physical things. But don't underestimate the power of just holding on. Hold on. You might be surprised that tomorrow will be better. It'll be okay. It might take a few days. Hold on. I'm only saying it because not enough people do. And it's really, really important. Because some of the most empathic, psychic, telepathic, most reasonable people kill themselves. They're so open to the world, to the divine. They see so much of what is happening, and it's overwhelming. Even when it's good, sometimes it's so overwhelming it feels unbearable. Like you just can't handle it. If that's how you feel sometimes, granted, a lot of people break that way, a lot of people turn psychopathic that way, but for those who can just survive it, their power is so saturated that if they can hold on and heal, these will be the people who have so much to contribute to the future that isn't even on people's lips yet, but will be. Have a good day.